So we're going to start off by just doing a little bit of a recap about what we covered in the last two webinars. So 2 weeks ago, we looked at emotional intelligence, and our focus then was on managing self. We started off with emotional intelligence, then we talked about some tips for developing winning habits. I gave you some insight in terms of the difference between responsibility, accountability, and blame, and highlighted how you as a manager should handle those. And again, the bottom line is avoid blame. It leads you nowhere. And then we wrapped up that webinar by talking about self-care, replenishing your cup. And to put that in context for those who may not have been with us, you cannot pour from an empty cup. So if you are to show up as the best possible manager or leader, you have to take care of yourself first. So that was webinar number 2. In webinar number 3, which was last week, I presented you with my model for the 4 components of trust, and a second model that I've developed, the relationship building block model. And then we looked at a third model, which is situational leadership. Now, after each webinar, one of the things that we ask persons to do is to complete a survey. And I want to thank all those who have completed the surveys thus far. It's part of my market research for the book. And the information has been particularly helpful. But I cannot miss out on a coaching opportunity. And so here it is. So what you see before you is the list of topics that have shown up in your responses in terms of what additional information would you like to see covered in the book. Now, of course, I haven't shared with you everything that's in the book. So if you notice on the left side of your screen, you see a list with check marks. So let me deal with the first one, time management. After every single webinar, we've had 2 or at least 3 people saying they would like to see the book cover time management. After I saw it the first time, I resisted it. I saw it the second time, I still was kind of resisting, but I realized, and my marketing and communications people tell me, that I have to give my customers what they want. So over the weekend, I actually sat down and wrote a chapter on time management. Why did I resist it for so long? Because the truth be told, I do not think that time management is a real thing. I don't think you can manage time, but I've written a chapter on it, and in that chapter I explain why I don't think you can manage time, and I'm not going to leave you floundering. I then go on to tell you what it is that you can do. And just to give you a sneak preview, it's about the choices that you make. Time is what it is. You have choices to make about what you do with the time that's available to you and everyone else. All right, and we've also had requests for dealing with difficult people. That is actually a subsection in one of the chapters. Showing consistency between words and action, that comes down to emotional intelligence. You may recall, those of you who've been with us from the beginning, we dealt with emotional intelligence. The first thing we started off was self-awareness, and we also dealt with self-expression. And so showing consistency, that's covered under the topic of emotional intelligence. In terms of building relationships as a passive individual, the chapter that deals with building relationships will cover this for you, along with emotional intelligence. Managing up, there's a chapter dedicated to managing your boss. Influencing others, there's a chapter dedicated to persuasion and influence, and we actually touched on that in the very first webinar where we did an overview. In terms of conflict, there isn't a chapter that deals exclusively with conflict, but we talk about conflict in the context of relationships, in the context of managing your team. Coaching, there's an entire chapter on coaching, and that's one of the things that we're going to look at this evening. And also in terms of reviewing performance, part of that comes into coaching, but there's also a chapter on giving and receiving feedback. So the things on your left, you can rest assured that they will be covered in the book. So let's come over to the second column now. So we've had specific requests for dealing with managers who think they're superior to you. And you might be asking yourself, why is that in the second column when I said that there's a chapter on managing your boss? The reason I've put this over in the second column, which is things that I will not be addressing in the book, is because of how it's phrased. Because the focus is on what somebody thinks. And you'll notice that there's the third bullet on the right talks about other people's attitudes. Now, the thing is, attitude and what somebody's thinking is not something that you can know definitively. So you can be on a very slippery slope, because if you assume that the person thinks this and you start behaving as if that's the truth, and the person said that is not my truth, where do you go from there? So again, it's in that column to caution you against assumptions you make, stories you tell yourself about other people, and then behave as if those stories are the gospel truth. Okay, dealing with managers who have ulterior motives. Similarly, how do you know if someone has ulterior motives? Now, if you talk about a behavior that suggests to you that the person has ulterior motives, then we can open that up. But again, I caution against making assumptions and then behaving as if those assumptions are the gospel truth. And then insecure employees' baggage. So we're going to talk about that, because the name of the series is Level Up. The focus is on you taking your performance to the next level. If you're focusing on the fact that someone else has baggage, that means you're not focusing on your own performance, on your own behavior, on how you are showing up. So I said I would do a little bit of coaching, and that, you know, in a coaching relationship, I always have my clients focus on the things that you can control and influence. So where are you spending most of your time? So there are three circles that you will see on the screen before you. The largest circle is labeled the circle of concern. And there can be all sorts of things in there, from climate change to whether it's going to rain tomorrow, to if I'm going to go over by 5 minutes or 10 minutes tonight. All of these may be things that concern you, but you have no control over them. Okay, you might argue, yes, I have control over climate change. You may be able to do some things, and we encourage you to do some things, but in terms of impacting climate change on a global scale, you in your sphere of life are not going to have that big an impact on it. So circle of concerns, things in the world that concern you. However, you have neither influence or control over them. So the next circle in is the circle of influence. So not within your control, but there are things that you can do to influence them. And the smallest circle is your circle of control. These are things that are within your direct control. So I'm going to ask you to go into the chat box now and answer this question. Where are you spending your time? Are you spending most of your time in the circle of concern, or are you in the circle of influence, or are you in the circle of control? So again, let me see what you have to say about that in response to that in the chat. And Pam, I'm going to ask you to just share with me what's coming up in the chat as the responses come in. Don't be shy, people. No wrong or right answers. Just want to see where you're starting out. Okay.
Okay, so we have someone who mostly is in the circle of control with some time in the circle of influence. Larissa is in the circle of control, and Simone is between influence and control. Some persons are somewhat between concern and influence.
Mm-hmm.
Oscar is in the circle of influence, as
Okay.
well as Patricia and Claudette.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for sharing, folks. I'm going to move on. You can continue to enter your responses in the chat. Now, here's the thing. Staying in the circle of concern is reactive. because remember, you have neither influence or control over it. So if you're out there, you're purely reacting to things that are happening in the external environment. And what that serves to do is to make your circle of influence and control smaller. If you notice that the arrows are pointing inwards. So with the reactive focus, you're staying in your circle of concern, and that diminishes the influence that you have. In contrast, now, if you are either in your circle of influence or in your circle of control, you're being proactive. And in doing so, you're broadening your influence, you're broadening your control. So that's why for the suggestions, for the request of content for the book that operate from things that people are concerned about, I'm not going to write a book about that because it doesn't help you. You're in reactive mode. That's not how you level up. You level up by being proactive, staying in your circle of influence or control, and in that way, making it bigger. All right, so I'm going to get down off of that particular soapbox for now, and we're going to jump into our content for this evening's webinar. And again, our focus is on managing systems and processes. So we have three subtopics. We're going to look at high performance teams. We're going to look at coaching. And I think this might end up being the most popular chapter in the book, just because there's so much shared pain here conducting great meetings. All right, so let's delve right in with an opinion poll. So Pam is going to launch the poll. It's true or false. While work groups are organized around functions, high performance teams are based on a shared sense of purpose and high trust relationships. True or false? So we're going to have the poll open for just about a minute. So we ask you to jump right in and share your responses with us. Okay, looks like we won't even need the whole minute for this one. You guys have come in really quickly with your responses. We're just about at 90% response rate right now. We'll give just a couple more seconds if the final few folks want to come in. And the response is almost unanimous at this point in time. All right, so here we are. We have one person saying false and everyone else came in with true. Okay, so you were almost unanimous with that response. And in fact, it is true. And we're going to take a deeper dive into high performance teams. But the primary distinction, when you think about a work group, your people there who have a particular function and the focus is on the function. With the high performance team, the thing that holds them together is much more than the function that they execute. All right, so definitions now. So a work group, it's domain specific, and the activity within a work group would focus on the discussion around a specific subject area. So working group members, they do not take responsibility for results other than their own. So think about that in terms of groups of people who work together around a particular function, and I'm responsible for what comes off of my desk or my section of the assembly line, and you're responsible for your part. That's a work group. In contrast now, a high performance team is tight-knit. They're focused on their goal. They have supportive processes, and the processes support each other's work, but also support the people. So in that way, any team member can overcome barriers in achieving the team goal, and you know that the other members of the team have your back. Now, I know that I have some people on the line who have been on my favorite high performance team. And so Anika is on. I'm not sure if Emmeline is on yet. I think Kerry is on. So I have had the privilege of leading more than one high performance team, but this particular team that had Kerry and Nonika and Brenda Lee and Emmeline and Blanca and Patsy, they feature in my book. So I had to get their permission to write about them, because I didn't just tell the wonderful stories. I spoke about the times when we struggled too, but spoke about them to illustrate the lessons learned. So there's a big difference between a work group and a high performance team. And if you're fortunate and you get to lead a high performance team, I mean, it's like music. It's almost magical, the things you can accomplish. Okay, so here's a checklist for a high performance team. They need a clear vision of where you're headed and what you want to accomplish. And that clear vision has to be established by the leader. So you as manager, you need to establish a clear vision and communicate that to your team. The team members then need to be excited about that vision and excited about contributing to it. Because if you come up with a vision and it totally leaves them cold, you're not going to become a high performance team. Your team members really need to believe in the vision that you share with them and want to see it come to pass, and so are willing to contribute to that. You have to have clearly defined priorities in order to achieve the vision. So having the vision is not enough, because there are multiple ways you can get to a vision. But you need, and so you don't want people to be going in different directions saying, yeah, that's, I'm trying to accomplish the same thing, but I think we can do it this way. So you have to have clearly defined priorities and agreement in terms of what those priorities are. We need to know what success looks like, so that if we're not successful, we all know we missed the mark. And how we give and receive. And it's important for you as a manager to know you don't just give feedback, you have to be open to receiving feedback. And there were occasions when one or more of them, because sometimes they would gang up on me, they would come into my office and announce that they needed to speak to me, and they would give me feedback. And remember, we spoke about trust before. They knew it was safe to do that, that I wasn't going to be biting their heads off or anything. That's the nature of the relationship that we had established. So clear measures of success and regular feedback on performance. And here I want to emphasize again, we're not giving feedback on anybody's attitude, on what we think they're thinking. We're giving feedback on their performance, and that feedback is in the context of the vision we have and of the priorities that we've agreed upon. Open communication and positive relationships. Remember these from the relationship building blocks, okay? And I think there's one more. Yes, a regular practice of identifying and solving problems. In some organizations, the approach to problems is to pretend you don't see them. Bury your head in the sand, look the other way. On a high-performing team, you want to identify the problems quick, fast, and in a hurry so you can fix them. Right? And remember when we spoke about responsibility and accountability, on a high performance team, accountability is huge. And remember, accountability is forward looking. You examine what happened in order to ensure that the same mistakes aren't made going forward, to see what you can learn from it. So that's your checklist for a high performance team. You need all 6 elements in order to have a high performance team. Here's some more. In a high performance team, you have ability to make decisions when and where required. While I was leading the team that I mentioned, I was also serving as Antigua and Barbuda's non-resident ambassador to a number of Latin American countries. So that meant that I was out of the country a lot. The department had to continue to operate in my absence. And it had to operate as efficiently, as effectively as if I were sitting at my desk. And so the members of the team knew that they had authority to make decisions. If something happened in my absence, they didn't have to wait for me to come back to fix it. If they thought it was something beyond them, they always knew they could get in touch with me and ask me what to do. Okay? So you have to empower the members of your team. Conflict. You cannot pretend that there's no conflict. If there's no conflict, something is wrong with your team. Because if everybody always agrees and has the same opinion on everything, then you're probably falling prey to groupthink, or you probably don't need the people that you have there, because if all of them, all they do is echo what you're saying, you're not getting the best out of them. So you need to be willing and able to successfully manage conflict. There's nothing inherently wrong with conflict. Conflict is simply a difference in opinion. And by ventilating and thrashing out differences in opinion, you can get to richer solutions. Okay, shared leadership. As I mentioned, I wasn't always physically on site. So there would be times when other people would step up to the plate in terms of taking on the leadership role. And what we did, leadership rotated based on what was required. Remember, we spoke about situational leadership last week. Leadership can also be contextual. So if, for example, we were doing something in relation to payroll, there was a particular person on the team that payroll was her jam. So whatever she said about the payroll, we were going to look to her for it. If it came to, for example, industrial relations, which I confess is not my forte, I would look to my second in command with Brenda Lee. She was very good at that. So if you're going to have a high performance team, put your ego aside and realize you're going to look to the person who is the best qualified to lead in a particular situation or context. We had very productive meetings, and I'm going to talk a bit more about that when we come to great meetings just before we wrap up this evening. Clearly defined roles and work procedures. So everybody had a job, everybody knew what the job was. We had standard operating procedures for everything. That doesn't mean that we didn't help each other out, right? But it was just that there was no lack of clarity in terms of what was expected of each member of the team. And we operated across functions. So even though I said no, so Blanca was our go-to person for payroll, she would cooperate and everybody would cooperate with her, and we would cooperate with people outside of the HR department as well in order to get the job done. So high performance teams, I kind of raced through it because again, time is not in our favor tonight. But if you have any questions, concerns, comments, you can go ahead and put it in the chat and Pam will draw that to my attention. Pammy, anything I need to touch on or respond to before I move on to the next topic?
We have one question that actually came in very early.
Uh-huh.
And the question states that there are some team members who have strengths that need to be released, but perhaps due to many reasons, their abilities are overlooked.
Okay.
Now, what this person wants to know is, how does management now unleash these qualities, builds confidence, and trains them towards releasing their full potential without having to foot the entire bill? How does management assist the team member in going that one step further to creating the niche that can be developed into something more for themselves?
Okay, I'm not clear about the footing the bill part of it, but in terms of performance coaching, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, that is how you unleash the potential within the members of your team. And it's a one-on-one conversation that you'll need. And so you need to know your people. So I called out names of ladies who were on my high performance HR team. When I built that team, not one of them was an HR practitioner. None of them had worked in HR before, but I saw a spark in each one. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I got it right every single time, because I had some catch and release. There are people that I picked that it didn't pan out, and I said, sorry, my bad, missed the mark on that one. And I let them go back to doing whatever it is they were doing before I thought I saw something that would have worked in HR. And so over the course of our time together, they all went on to study HR. They did executive diplomas, they did master's degree, and today they're all outstanding HR practitioners in their own right. Now, in terms of footing the bill, I'm not sure what that is about, but it depends on your organizational context. Because I was in charge of HR at the time, the policies that I promoted supported learning and development. So some of the learning took place at the company's expense, but all of those ladies also invested in themselves because the company certainly didn't pay for any master's degrees. We had tuition reimbursement, so there was an opportunity for them to get something back. But you want them to have skin in the game. So they invested in themselves. I supported them in that investment. And like I said, today they're all outstanding professionals in their own right. Okay, thank you for that question. And you get a little bit more when we come into performance coaching, which is the next topic up. All right, so opinion poll. Coaching employees entails counseling, mentoring, and training them. True or false? So Pammy's going to launch that poll. And again, we're going to give you maximum of a minute to jump in and tell us what you think there. Okay, here again, we have some very strong opinions. Well, I shouldn't say strong opinions, strong consensus. Strong consensus. All right, so we're going to go ahead and close that out. And we see that 94% of you said that this is true. And unfortunately, you're wrong. Coaching is very different from counseling. It's very different from mentoring, and it's definitely different than training. Okay, so let's just go through what the differences are. So in counseling, you focus primarily on examining and understanding the person's past. All right, and this is what the psychologists and the psychiatrists do. They counsel people. So please don't go out there unless you have those qualifications. Don't go out there and be counseling people. Okay. Mentoring now draws on your own experience, and you use that to guide and direct. Now, remember when we did situational leadership last week, guiding and directing is not always what's required, because if somebody is already able and willing, you'd be micromanaging them if you went in there trying to guide and direct them. So the thing is, with coaching, what you want to do is to have the individual realize their full potential. So you don't show up with the answers when you're coaching. You show up with questions to help them get to the right answers. And then training, no. Training is designed based on predetermined learning objectives. So for example, I have some learning objectives in mind when I design the webinar. And I come to you with that. In coaching, no, the objectives are personalized based on the individual with whom you're interacting. So when I was coaching each of my direct reports now, it would be about them setting the agenda. I say to my coaching clients all the time that coaching is demand driven. You set the agenda. So typically when I get onto a coaching call with one of my clients after we've done, the catching up, my next question would be, so how can I best support you today? They set the agenda. All right, so that's the difference between coaching, counseling, mentoring, and training.
Ambassador, I just want to interrupt you for 1 second, because someone is questioning if when you're coaching, if you try to bring out the best in the person.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Ultimately, that's what coaching is about. Now, let me make a distinction here between, so in my bio, Pam would have mentioned that I am a professional coach. So that's one of my designations. I've studied to be a coach. All right. That's not what I'm asking you to do with your team. Okay, so professional coaching, executive coaching, life coaching is different than performance coaching. As a manager, you can acquire the skills to do performance coaching. There's a 2-day workshop that I do on performance coaching, and I was contracted by the government of Jamaica to do that for their HR practitioners because they accepted a recommendation that I had made to incorporate performance coaching into the public service. And at the beginning of day one, I said to the participants, by the time you leave here tomorrow afternoon, you would have coached, you would have been coached, and you would have seen others be coached. And people are really skeptical because they show up one day and you're telling me by tomorrow I'm going to be able to coach someone. And invariably, from the feedback that we get at the end of it, it really, you can learn it that quickly. All right. So you're not going to walk out of the webinar tonight being able to coach, but if you buy the book when it comes out, you have what you need in order to be able to acquire the skills to do that. Okay. Thanks for that question. So let's define performance coaching. Okay. So, and I've highlighted the key elements for you. So you're going to be facilitating the development and action planning of another individual to bring about change in their lives. And when we're talking about change in their lives, it's more leveling up. So as the question that Pam just read, it's about helping them to be better. And notice, it's development and action planning. So it's not just a conversation and at the end of the conversation, nothing happens. When you have a performance coaching conversation, it ends with a plan of action, something that the individual commits to doing. And the goals have to be SMART so that they're specific, they're achievable, they're relevant, they're realistic, relevant, and they're time bound. So that you can then go back and give feedback in your next coaching conversation about whether or not they were able to achieve what you set out to achieve. Okay? Performance coaching is not about giving advice. That's why it's not mentoring, right? Because if all you're doing is telling people the way that you would have done it, you're stunting their growth. You're not allowing them the opportunity to figure things out for themselves. And besides, they may come up with a way of doing it that's even better than what you would have suggested to them. The other thing is that they have ownership of it because it was their idea. As opposed to if you tell them, go do A, B, and C, they go do A, B, and C, and it doesn't work out. They're coming back and dropping it right back in your lap. Well, you told me to do so and so, I did it, and it didn't work. All right? If they came up with the plan of action, they try it, and it doesn't quite land the way that they wanted it to land, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to try something else. Okay? And the final component is that coaching, performance coaching requires the person to trust you and you to trust them. And this goes back to the relationship building blocks that we spoke about before. Pamela, you might have something for me, I think.
No questions in the chat as yet.
Okay. All right, so there we are with performance coaching. And remember, use the chat if you have any concerns, doubt, reservations, or if you want to add to what it is that we're sharing, because I'm seeing some things popping up.
Okay, we have one person that just ask a question. How does a manager facilitate the development and action planning?
Okay, we're going to get to that. And it's about sitting together and setting the goals in terms of what it is. I don't mean the SMART goals. No, what do we want to accomplish through this coaching conversation? All right, because you both need to be very focused on what it is that you want to accomplish. And I'm going to share a model with you. So stay with me and I'm going to get to that for you. All right, so the benefits of coaching. Using performance coaching, you can link the individual employee's performance to the business strategy. So remember, we spoke before about what the vision would be for the team. Even the vision for your team needs to be aligned to a company vision or an organizational vision and strategy. So what we call it is cascading that down. So you say, for example, if you say that you have a car dealership and the organization says we want to be the dealers for 60% of the cars on the road in Antigua and Barbuda. So that you come back, okay, what would the marketing people need to do for that to become a reality? What would the sales people need to do for that to become a reality? And for everyone, you ask yourself, how can I contribute to that goal? Therefore, if everybody then delivers on their goal, every department delivers on its goal, ultimately the organizational goal will be realized. Okay, so through performance coaching, you have those conversations about how they're contributing to the business strategy. Performance coaching also helps to improve conflict resolution. All right, because if you're going to have this one-on-one conversation, it gives you the opportunity to ventilate any differences of opinion and to resolve them. Okay, allows fuller use of individual talents, and this goes back to the question not too long ago about helping people to achieve their potential, right? Because if you're having these focused one-on-one conversations with your direct reports about them realizing their potential, of course, they're going to take their performance to the next level. Develop self-awareness. Self-awareness for the person who is being coached. And because it's a two-way conversation, it also gives you as the manager the opportunity to learn some things about yourself in terms of how you're showing up, how you're communicating, how effective you are at being a coach. Okay, encourages accountability. Now, remember I said you're going to be setting SMART goals. And so if you've set SMART goals and then you're going to follow up on them, that is where you lay the platform for accountability. Effective, and I see a typo, effective in bringing about attitudinal and behavioral changes. All right, so in the context of these conversations where you're giving and receiving feedback, if the feedback that you're getting speaks to the need to change anything, you have the opportunity to do so. Performance coaching also increases openness to personal learning because every coaching conversation is an opportunity for learning and development. Okay, enhances leadership capability through the development of self-reflection. You're encouraging and supporting your direct report to reflect on what they're doing, how they're showing up, and in the process, you're doing the same yourself. Okay, now this is like win, win, win. What do I mean by that? If you look at these 8 benefits, it benefits the employees, the person being coached. It benefits you as the person who is conducting the performance coaching conversation, and the entire organization benefits, because look at these things. You're aligning performance to strategy. The organization benefits. You're improving conflict resolution. The organization benefits. Accountability. The organization benefits. So this is why performance coaching is win, win, win. Okay, and I just looked at my watch and almost had a heart attack, so I'm going to move along. But Pam, don't hesitate to stop me if I need to address anything from the chat. All right, so we're going to get there, folks. So our third and final topic for this evening is conducting great meetings. So, poll. According to published research, most executives think that meetings are generally unproductive. True or false? So we see a split opinion here. Thus far, yeah, it's evening out. Let's see. All right, here we go with the results. So 62% of you said that it was true that most executives think that meetings are generally unproductive, and 38% of you thought that it was false. Here we go. It is true. So the reference is there for the research. And here we see that 67% of executives said that most meetings are unproductive. You know what's really scary about this is that the same people who are answering these surveys are the people who are having these meetings. All right. So we have people convening meetings and admitting that the meetings are failures, that they're unproductive. So I don't want that to happen to you. So in the book, step by step, I tell you what to do before the meeting, what to do during the meeting, and what to do after the meeting. Of course, we don't have time to get into all of that this evening, but I'm going to give you some tips that if you start using these right away, I guarantee you there will be an immediate improvement in the quality of the meetings that you have. All right, here's another poll. Creating and following an agenda can decrease the duration of a meeting by as much as, and this is multiple choice, 20%, 50%, 80%, or do you think it really doesn't make a difference whether you have an agenda or not? Okay, interesting results here. So we have 21% of you saying that you think it's a 20% improvement. We have 41% of you thinking that it's a 50% improvement. 23% saying 80%, and we have 15% of you thinking it doesn't make a difference. All right, so I can tell you right away, the answer is not D. It really does make a difference. And you're going to be surprised by how much of a difference. 80%. You can decrease the duration of the meeting by as much as 80% simply by following an agenda. And if you think about meetings that you've been in that you just, drift from topic to topic, and the people who talk the loudest and the fastest take you off down a road that you wonder, why am I even in this conversation? So having the discipline to prepare an agenda and to stick to the agenda can significantly reduce the amount of time you need to complete the meeting. Okay. So I think of these meetings, the no agenda meetings, you're not sure why you're in the room meeting, you have no idea what it is you're trying to accomplish, you have no idea when it's going to be over. To me, that's a hostage situation. It is not a meeting. All right, so how do we transition from a hostage crisis to mission accomplished, where everyone knew what the meeting was about, and at the end of the meeting they can say, yep, we got it done. So 5 strategies to transform your meetings from hostage crisis to mission accomplished. Starting with the agenda, and I hope that 80% will stick in your mind. Don't just prepare an agenda, but circulate the agenda in advance of the meeting so people can prepare to come to the meeting. Some of you in the webinar and some of you who may be listening to it after the fact, you may be so quick on your feet that you can show up, see the agenda, and be prepared to make meaningful and valuable contributions on the spur of the moment. If you're in that category, God bless you. For the rest of us who need to think about it, especially us introverts, those of us who process things internally before we speak, we would like to see the agenda, please, so that we can prepare. We may need to do some reading. We may need to give it some thought. We may need to bounce ideas off somebody else. Please tell us what the meeting is about. Okay, then make sure you have the right people in the room. It happens a lot, and especially in the public sector, and I'm not picking on the public sector, but it's my experience having worked in both, that their meetings, and you're sitting in another ministry, you get an invitation to attend a meeting, they didn't send you an agenda, so you don't even know what it's about, and you say, listen, I am busy, or I have a conflict, or I just don't feel like going, I'm going to send someone else. So you delegate someone else to go. The other person is just as clueless as you were in terms of what it's about. They show up and they realize they have nothing to contribute to the meeting. And just last year, I was working on a consultancy with a particular regional government, and we had indicated to the client that we want, instead of sending people surveys, because they don't always complete them, that we would bring the participants into a working session and have them complete the survey there on the spot. We told them this is what it was about. They say they told the other ministries what it was about. And we had more than one person come, and when we distributed the survey, the person said, I'm not authorized to answer any of these questions. All right, the wrong people in the room. Okay, keep the meeting as short as possible. If you have your agenda, you know what you want to accomplish, don't dilly-dally, get to the point, because people have other stuff they need to take care of. All right, send out the meeting notes. So, if you're going to send out notes, you would have had to have assigned somebody responsibility for taking notes. But I tell people all the time, the mind is, at least my mind, is a terrible place to store important information, because my memory is not what it used to be. So write it down, send out the notes, because if not, by the time they walk out of the room, walk out of the building, they get back to their desk, they get taken up with other things, it might just go away. And especially if there were action items for their attention, they may never get done. So take responsibility of that, mitigate that risk by sending out your meeting notes. And then number 5, follow up. Follow up, especially if you have your action agenda coming out of the meeting, you would have put due dates on certain things. It's your responsibility as the person who convened the meeting to get back in touch with people, to find out if they completed what it is they were supposed to complete, and then to update the other folks who attended the meeting. So Pam, anything in the chat that I should address?
Yes. How soon should the notes be sent out?
I love that question. And some of you are not going to agree with me on this one, but personally, I think you need to do it within a day or two. Because the thing is, if it has action items on it, if you wait, especially with these monthly meetings, if you wait till 2-3 weeks have passed and you know the next meeting coming up and you rush to send out the notes just a week before, you think those things are going to get done? So send it out, strike while the iron is hot, have people remember so that they can start acting on the commitments that were made. So thanks for that. Good to go, Pam?
One more question just popped up. Should those steps be followed even if you are having weekly meetings? With the presence of COVID-19, they're having more frequent meetings.
The short answer is yes. More frequent meetings don't mean that you have more frequent hostage crises. Okay? These are the principles. It doesn't matter how frequent the meetings are. These are the principles of having good meetings, right? So absolutely, there's nothing here that I would say, oh, you don't need to do it. Now, let me take that back. Let me look at number 1, always distribute an agenda. If your meeting has a standing agenda and the participants are the same, well, then you can say, okay, I don't need to do that, because we know the agenda is always going to be the same, and we know the people are always going to be the same. However, I would even caveat that by saying that even though the agenda is the same from week to week, there may be different aspects that you want to highlight, and I would flag that and let people know in advance. Anything else?
Just a statement. The notes in that instance, weekly, could just be a summary email.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not telling you take minutes. Notice I didn't say send out minutes. It's notes. So you want to know what decisions were made and what were the action items, who's responsible, when they're supposed to get done. It doesn't have to be written in complete sentences, people. It can be bullet points. The objective is to remind people and to stimulate action. Okay, and at this point, I just want to give you a heads up that if you complete the post-webinar survey this week, the bonus giveaway is actually a job aid for having a particular type of meeting that's really effective and doesn't take a lot of time. And if I have time left, I'll actually give you a little preview of it. All right. So, effective utilization of a meeting agenda. So remember, you're going to send out your agenda ahead of the meeting so that people can prepare, tell them the purpose of the meeting, okay? And if there's any pre-reading or any preparation that needs to be done, let them know that up front as well. And there are different types of meetings. And in the book, I go through the different categories of meetings and how you prepare for each of those. But let's say it's a brainstorming session. You need to let people know that in advance, what is the topic around which you're going to be brainstorming. If it's a problem-solving meeting, let people know what's the problem you're going to be looking at so they can begin to apply their minds to it before they show up at the meeting. Okay, proper preparation prevents poor performance. The 5 P's motto, and it also applies to meeting preparation. Getting the right people in the room. Okay, and again, in the public sector, a lot of times you have these meetings, the room full, you know, the people not, a lot of the people not even slightly interested in what is happening, and so you run the risk of what we call social loafing. So they're on their phone, or even worse, they could be distracting somebody else that's in the room, so that, you know, they're not contributing in a meaningful way in terms of what it is that you want to have happen there. So get the right people in the room and help them to prepare to make a meaningful contribution. All right. Some of you may be familiar with this quotation from Winston Churchill. A good speech, and I've substituted meeting, should be like a woman's skirt, long enough to cover the subject and short enough to create, and I add maintain, interest. All right. So don't be rambling on just for the sake of hearing your voice. Get to the point, cover the point, move on. Right? And before anyone asks, I can't tell you what is the ideal length of a meeting because it depends on the type of meeting, depends on what you're going to be doing, etc. But there is the job aid that you're going to get if you complete the survey is for a meeting that can be completed in 10 or 15 minutes, depending on how many people are present, because it's 3 minutes for each person in the meeting. So if you have 5 people, it's a 15-minute meeting. If you have 4, it's a 12-minute meeting. Okay, that's a particular type of meeting that you will see if you complete the survey. Okay, sending out meeting notes. The summary, all it needs, I alluded to this before, what is the salient points, what are the decisions taken, what are the action items, when are they due, and who is responsible for getting them done. If you do that, you help to maintain a sense of urgency so people act. The question came before in terms of how quickly. Me personally, because I take notes as we're going through it, by the time the meeting is finished, my notes are ready, but not everybody is like that. So 24, 48 hours max is what I would recommend, so you can strike while the iron is hot. And especially, as someone questioned before, if you're having these meetings on a weekly basis, don't let too much time pass, because then people won't have time to do the follow-up that they need to do. So those were the 5 tips. And oh, one more, the follow-up. So when people get back to their desk, the stuff, they're waiting for them. So don't just expect them to remember to do everything, follow up, or else you risk having things fall off the stove. All right, I think I saw some questions, some things lighting up in the chat, Pammy.
Yes, you do have a question. How should you interpret a meeting where only the person chairing the meeting is speaking and no one has an opinion?
That is not a meeting. Okay, it's masquerading as a meeting. Okay, no, this is a good opportunity, because I actually a few weeks ago got a WhatsApp message from someone who, social loafing in the people meeting, sent me a message saying, help, I'm being held hostage in a meeting, because it's someone that I talk to, so they know that I use that expression. So we started, messaging back and forth. So I said, okay, which one of the sins is being committed, type of thing. And the person told me what was happening, and I was able to give them a strategy. Because the same way you can manage your boss, if you are a participant in a meeting that's not going well, there are things that you can do. And I give you examples and even scripts in the book, so that you can help to turn a meeting around. So if there's no agenda, if you're having a good discussion but nobody's taking note of the decisions made, all those scenarios I highlight in terms of what you can do to help to salvage the meeting. But I warn you, be careful, because if you show up, you may look like a superhero to the other people who were suffering along with you. And next thing you know, you find that they're looking to you to save the day every time. So then you encourage them to buy the book as well, so that they can also save the day. Anything else, Pam, from the chat?
No, nothing else from the chat at the moment.
Okay, good. So let's see how well you retained what we've covered. All right, so knowledge poll. Notice this is not an opinion. This is based on something that we've covered this evening. Which of the following are features of a high-performance team? A, a clear vision. B, clearly defined roles and responsibilities. C, members who take responsibility for their individual contributions. All of the above, or A and B only. So here's the jump right in. You will have a minute to select what you think is the correct answer. Don't overthink it, folks. Okay, you just have 5 seconds left before we close it out. All right, so 59% of you got it right. The answer is E, A and B only. Why? Because you are not only taking responsibility for your individual contributions. Remember, we said that was a work group as opposed to a high performance team. All right, we have another one for you. Which of the following is not one of the 5 strategies for eliminating the hostage crisis? So this one, we just covered it. So it's not one of the strategies. Prepare and stick to the agenda. Invite the right people, provide snacks, keep it as short as possible, send out a summary after the meeting. All right, this was a giveaway. All right, 97% of you got this one right. Okay, so you can do without the snacks, people. That is not what eliminates the hostage crisis, because you can have snacks and people still feel as if you're holding their hostage. They'll be well fed, but still feel like hostages. All right, one more. So earlier in the webinar, we discussed 8 distinct benefits of performance coaching. Who is impacted by those benefits? The manager, the employee being coached, the organization, or all 3 stakeholders. Anik says snacks at the meeting is probably their way of luring you into the hostage situation. I think you're so right. All right, so that knowledge quiz has been closed down, and we see that 89% of you said all 3 stakeholders, and you're absolutely right, that 89%. Remember, I said it was a win-win-win proposition. The manager benefits, the employee benefits, the organization benefits. All right, great. So, folks, we have run a little over time, as I had predicted. However, if there are any lingering questions or comments, I'll take them before handing back over to Pammy. Okay, I'm not seeing anything popping up in the chat. So thank you very much. And that's a recap of where we've been: high performance teams, performance coaching, conducting great meetings. All of these have their own chapter in the book under the section that deals with managing systems and processes. So that's it in terms of the Level Up webinar series. There's just one more thing left. And for those males who have been with us for 2 or more webinars, we're going to be extending you an invitation to a focus group so that I can ensure that the book takes care of your needs. And, you know, they say, you know, think like a man. I can't. So I wrote the book, I Think Like a Woman. I wrote it like a woman. So I need to talk to some men to find out what you guys think and how I can best help you. All right. So thank you very much, guys. Look out for an email from us. Pammy, back over to you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. And we want to say thank you to everyone for joining us this evening in our 4th staging of our Level Up Leadership webinar series. We want to invite you to complete our survey. I'm going to post the link in the chat, and persons who complete our survey within the next hour will receive a prize courtesy of Underwood Talent Development Services. If you have any more questions, links to contact UTDS is also in the chat. And if you would like to watch a replay of our webinars, please visit our Facebook page, Meraki268, or you could follow Underwood Talent Development Services. Thank you guys for joining us, and look out for the link. And remember to finish the survey within the hour so that you can claim your prize.